This series contains real stories from a poisoning outbreak, told from the perspective of an investigation unfolding in real time as we search for clues and answers. It includes severe illness and death. Some moments may be difficult to hear. The views and opinions expressed on this series represent the people speaking them, and not any organization they are affiliated with. This podcast discusses medical and food safety topics, but it is for education and storytelling only. It is not medical advice and makes no claims about the safety of any food. If you are concerned about a possible poisoning or the safety of any food, contact your local poison center for free personalized medical advice. In the U.S., that number is 1-800-222-1222.
6 people are now dead. Authorities say poisoned Tylenol capsules reached store shelves.
Dozens became ill after drinking coffee investigators believe was deliberately poisoned.
Health officials are tracking a cluster of lead poisonings linked to a popular fruit pouch sold for children. Investigators suggest the contamination may have been intentional.
A train carrying hazardous chemicals derailed overnight, forcing thousands from their homes.
Officials believe a toxic ingredient may be behind illnesses at a restaurant. Investigators are focused on a spice that should never have been in food. Experts say even a tiny amount can be fatal.
Several deaths are now being reviewed.
More than 50 people have reported symptoms. State health officials are now working to find the source.
The company is offering a $100,000 reward for information on who may have added the poison.
Authorities are calling it a poisoning.
A mass poisoning.
Another outbreak.
A poisoning outbreak.
An outbreak.
An outbreak.
An outbreak.
A mass poisoning outbreak.
Welcome back. In our last episode, we walked through the extensive testing done by the CDC, FDA, and Montana Department of Health, trying to find the cause of this fatal mass poisoning that was evolving in Bozeman, Montana. Despite all their efforts, absolutely nothing had been isolated. The only clue was that morel mushrooms seemed to be a common theme among people who got sick. So how do you link a mushroom to an illness when there's no toxin defined, and it's never been associated with this problem in the past? Well, it turns out we've been here before. So instead of pushing forward, we're going to take a step sideways to another outbreak that might just help us solve this one. Meet Dr. Emmeline Lagrange.
My name is Dr. Emmeline Lagrange. I'm a French neurologist specialized in rare neuromuscular disease. I work in a center dedicated to ALS disease for maybe around 25 years now. And in US, I think it's Lou Gehrig disease. In French, we call it la maladie de Charcot.
Dr. Lagrange specializes in neuromuscular disorders, like ALS, a disease that causes your motor neurons to decay.
So you get paralyzed quickly with a short lifetime, around 3 years after being diagnosed. It's terrible because all your senses are good except you are paralyzed, unable to walk, to talk. So most people die because they need help to breathe.
A devastating disease for those impacted, resulting in slow paralysis until your muscles are too weak to swallow or power your lungs. So when Dr. Lagrange was contacted about a cluster of ALS cases occurring in the small mountain town of Montchavin at a rate thousands of times higher than occurs in the general population, she became concerned.
It's a rare disease, 2.5 people for 100,000 people. We found 4 people of 200 people living, and they were all neighbors. And we started because they were 4, but at the end they were 14, and we published 14 cases.
So 14 out of 200, when normally you get 2.5 cases out of 100,000 per year. So,
yes, exactly.
So this is thousands of fold more common in this little area than anywhere else. Dr. Lagrange had an outbreak on her hands. Perhaps not as explosive and fast-moving as the one in Bozeman, Montana, but just as devastating. She identified 4 patients with ALS, and by the time she finished her investigation, 14 people had received the diagnosis of this fatal disease. And unfortunately, she didn't have a cause. One thing I would think when I have multiple people in a small town, historically our tribes all live together, right? So I would think, is there possibly a genetic cause for this? Is this just multiple family members with a genetic link? But it turns out most ALS cases aren't inherited. Is that correct? Right.
Well, that's correct. Around 10% are inherited. Two genes are very common in both familial ALS disease, and none of them had a genetic cause. And we tried to find a common gene between all the people. We did not. They have no ancestors in common.
Interesting. But there are, it seems, clusters of ALS in other parts of the world related to environmental exposure. So actually, it kind of seems to me like actually the predominant pathway of ALS is via an environmental trigger.
Yes, exactly.
Are there some known environmental triggers?
We have some triggers and some risk factors, and it's not exactly the same. But as trigger to environmental factors, you have the neurotoxin, BMAA.
BMAA is one environmental toxin that was actually tied to an outbreak of ALS in Guam. So we know there are environmental causes, far more than we've fully characterized. And when you get an outbreak, you need to start searching for them. So let's go back to the start.
I called the GP to announce her the fourth case. And she said to me, this is too much because they are all neighbors and they all work together. So I was really worried. And the first thing I called the French agency because I needed help. Then after I called Professor Camus in Montpellier City. I knew he had already investigated a cluster close to his town.
Dr. Lagrange contacted the French agency for more support, as well as a professor in Montpellier who had been involved in another ALS outbreak near that city. In that outbreak, they discovered a number of environmental factors that may have contributed, but couldn't pin down to one source. Together, they began investigating this small mountain town to try to find the cause of this devastating disease. Not unlike our outbreak in Montana, there's multiple avenues that need to be investigated.
We read everything written on the ALS factors, environmental factors, and we test them in the village. So we started with heavy metals, genetic causes, of course. We were very worried about the artificial snow, radon. Radon. Creosote. It's the same in English.
Creosote oil?
Creosote oil, exactly.
Yes.
Because many of the chalets used old woods coming from French Alps, and we were very worried about this. One of the cycle, toxin, BMAA.
And where were you looking for these substances?
Drinking water, vegetables, and mushrooms. And then after, we had no more ideas because we tested everything that was in literature.
Sound familiar? Dr. Lagrange and her colleague, Dr. Camus, tested everything they could think of, trying to find the cause of this ALS. They searched all through the literature. Everything they looked for came back negative. But they did end up finding a culprit.
We made a lot of interviews of people because one of the first things Professor Camus told me, it was, please don't have any regrets. Now all people are alive. You have to interview them for a long time about all their life habits. We did it with them in the village. We compared them with their families and also to other villages close to the village.
Dr. Lagrange began interviewing the people who developed ALS and the people who didn't, gathering information on everything they did, ate, wore, talked about, in order to try and identify if there was something unique amongst those who developed ALS. This is how we use epidemiologic data to help hone in on a culprit. You have to gather information about an entire exposome, you would say. How long is this taking to interview each of the
3 hours, yes. It was very, very long.
Do you live near Montchavin?
No, far away.
And were you spending a lot of time in this village? Did you have to move there to do this?
Yes, we did it with the people in the village. Many weekends and holidays with my family too, because I'm 2 hours away from the village. And it's not my job because I don't have, even if I work in a university hospital, I don't have a job dedicated to research.
Right.
I'm a clinician. So I had to do it on holidays. So
this was on your own, just desire to help find
yes, exactly.
out what's going on. That's really impressive. Makes me grateful that we have teams in the U.S. who are able to help investigate these kinds of outbreaks. Although, if I had to investigate an outbreak, I think a French mountain town might be a nice place to do it. Through hours of meticulous labor and interview about everything these patients and their matched controls had done, Dr. Lagrange found a very interesting finding.
At the end, when compared them to other village people, and we had 2 factors that were very different from their families and other villagers. They ate dandelions and mushrooms.
Mushrooms and dandelions were unique to the groups that developed ALS. Dr. Lagrange had data, but wasn't sure what it meant. It was time to reach out for help. Fortunately, there were researchers out there who have been working on these ALS outbreaks for decades. After all, these ALS clusters aren't new, and some of them actually have been solved. One of the most famous clusters was in Guam, where in the 1960s, researchers had realized the native people had a rate of ALS 100 times that of the general population. And a team of scientists had devoted decades trying to understand why.
So we wanted to meet someone on the Guam principal team, and we contacted Peter Spencer.
Peter Spencer. I'm presently a professor of neurology and occupational health sciences at the Oregon Health and Science University.
Dr. Spencer has worked on a number of outbreaks of neurologic disease, many of which were related to cultural food dependence on specific native food sources.
Latherism, for example, from too much of the grass pea, crippling motor system disease, especially in children, associated with food dependence on the cassava plant, or Japanese encephalitis caused by eating immature lychee fruit. Delicious, delicious fruit.
Well, I think we could spend hours diving into each one of these outbreaks. His findings from Guam are what are most important to us today.
The Pacific island of Guam in the 1950s, it was discovered that ALS was 50 to 100 times more prevalent than anywhere else in the world. Several persons suggested the cycad. And so the cycad plant is an ancient plant, a gymnosperm. It was prevalent during the age of the dinosaurs. It's still present in Guam today. It's an endangered species. But traditionally, the native people of Guam would collect the seed of this plant and they would cut it open and soak it in water in an attempt to remove the poisonous compounds and then eat it as tortillas when they believe it's safe. These families were differentially successful at this. I remember interviewing one patient who said he threw it in a bucket for 2 or 3 days, whereas other patients, they carefully washed it for 2 to 3 weeks. The possible role of the cycad was first proposed in 1962. They launched the first of 6 conferences to examine the link between cycad and ALS, but it took until 2023 for it to be finally explained and accepted, I believe. We studied the composition of the flour that resulted from the processing of the inner part of the cycad seed and found that there was a very strong association between the residual concentration of the major toxin called cycasin and the presence of neurodegenerative disease in the families that produce the cycad flower. There was also a second toxin, a small amino acid, abbreviated BMAA, which I studied, back in 87, and showed that did produce a remarkable neurologic disease in non-human primates. We believe that both of these compounds, cycasin and BMAA, may play a key role in the triggering of this disease, probably by damaging DNA.
The BMAA Peter Spencer is talking about is the same one Dr. Lagrange went looking for in Montchavin, and it's going to be an important link to how they eventually landed on a possible culprit for the ALS outbreak in our small French mountain town.
People still question this very, very strong association. The important thing is this, that when the Americans took over Guam after the end of the Second World War, they said that you have to stop eating these native foods and using these native medicines. We have something much better than that, French fries and hamburgers. And the Chamorro people adopted a continental U.S. cuisine. The disease progressively disappeared from Guam.
Interesting. This is just one of the many outbreaks that Dr. Spencer has worked on. He's got quite the name for himself in the neurodegenerative outbreak community, which I guess is a thing. But his proven track record was one of the reasons why Dr. Lagrange reached out to him when their investigation in Montchavin was turning out nothing but dead ends.
Montchavin, yes.
Montchavin.
Very unusual. This study was led by my colleague Lagrange, and initially it involved Doctors Foucault, Chappert, epidemiologist from the French ministry, and Professor William Camus, very famous neurologist. Professor Camus gave a talk in Strasbourg on the story from Montchavin, and he mentioned mushrooms in his talk, and that immediately triggered a question from me in the audience as to what type of mushrooms were eaten by the cases. He didn't have the answer, but Dr. Lagrange then launched into an expansion of her already large investigation.
At Dr. Spencer's prompting, they re-investigated their ALS cases, digging deeper into this unique finding of wild mushroom foraging to find out exactly what these patients had been eating.
And in mushroom, they said morels, and another one called chanterelle in France. Most of them have had an acute poisoning.
Can I pause you? You said morel or false morel?
No, they said morels. They said morels. And I have already contacted the poisoning center in Montpellier, Professor Randari, the first one who described the poisoning of morels, real morels.
Another association of morels and toxicity. Dr. Lagrange found that her patients were eating dandelions, chanterelles, and morels, and many of them had become poisoned by morels, something that apparently is well described in the French literature. They seem to be the experts on mushroom poisoning because it's almost absent in the English literature. And I think that's why this is such a foreign concept to most U.S. toxicologists. And while we might know that eating uncooked morels can cause some nausea and vomiting, the French have actually described an entirely different syndrome.
The real morels, sometimes you have an acute poisoning, it's like stroke. It could
cerebellar syndrome, right?
Yeah, exactly. And every winter, as a neurologist, we met people and they just ate morels. Real morels, they come to neurology because they're suspected of stroke, but MRI are normal. And now we are very aware of this. So we ask people, what did you eat last night? last supper. And we found morels regularly.
The French were the first to describe the Morel neurologic syndrome, something I learned about while researching this podcast after I had a study translated from French.
the neurological syndrome described with morel consumption is actually quite interesting. So patients might appear inebriated with symptoms like ataxia. They can have difficulty maintaining their balance and feel dizzy. Some people might have tremors or be disoriented, in addition to having the GI syndrome. Typically, the gastrointestinal symptoms tend to occur earlier in the course of illness, while the neurological symptoms happen later. And the patients can experience one set of symptoms or both. Now, these are broad generalizations, so patients can present in all sorts of ways. But while GI symptoms are said to occur with consumption of raw morels in particular, GI and neurological symptoms have both been reported in cooked samples of morels.
This is an entirely different syndrome than what was described during the outbreak in Bozeman, Montana. It seems to only happen after they eat large meals of morels and takes quite a while to develop, several hours. How this piece of the puzzle fits, I'm not sure, other than more evidence that the morels may be more biologically active than we ever thought. But let's get back to our outbreak in Montchavin. Dr. Spencer is now involved in the case, and he had asked Dr. Lagrange to interview everyone about the mushrooms they had eaten, and they found everyone reported chanterelles and morels. Or at least, that's what they thought.
I'm not from here. I'm from the southwest of France, and we don't eat morels in my country. I'm Basque. So I didn't think of false morels, I must admit. But Peter, it was the first thing Peter said. He said, probably false morels, because they can have hydrazine, and we have to go back. So he went with me in the village, and we made many of our interviews.
And the bottom line was that all of the ALS cases had a history of collecting and consuming Gyromitra mushrooms.
Does this sound familiar to you? A massive outbreak of devastating disease, initially pointing at a true morel, until everyone raised the question, wait, could this actually be the false morel? And this time, they were right.
These are the acutely poisonous mushrooms, which we now associate with ALS in that location, whereas the controls, those without ALS, also collected wild mushrooms, but they never ate the Gyromitra species. Now, Gyromitra esculenta was outlawed from sale in France, but many of these cases in Montchavin still ate it as food.
And I ask, how did that become your suggestion? Was there a clue that made you believe that gyromitrin containing mushrooms would be associated with ALS?
Hydrazine compounds, in particular monomethyl hydrazine, that was found not only in these Gyromitra mushrooms, but was used in commerce and industry as a rocket fuel by NASA. I noted that NASA Ames laboratory had a cluster of 8 ALS cases, all of whom worked together in 3 buildings, but I could never prove that they were involved in hydrazine manufacture or utilization. But in 2019, I published an hypothesis in which I showed how the cycad toxin from the Western Pacific ALS clusters was chemically related to hydrazine compounds, in particular monomethyl hydrazine that was found in these Gyromitra mushrooms.
Wow. What they did here is remarkable. They spent years testing and ruling things out one by one, but found no toxin or clear smoking gun. Then, through meticulous interviews, one signal kept rising to the top: mushroom foraging. And at first, it looked like true morels. But that didn't fully add up. So just like in Bozeman, the question became, what if this was a false morel? And in this outbreak, their hunch was right. When they brought in additional expertise and went back to confirm what people had actually eaten, the story changed. Those morels weren't morels at all. They were false morels that had gyromitrin, a mushroom toxin chemically related to the poison at the center of the ALS outbreak in Guam. And just like in Guam, when people stopped consuming this poison, the disease disappeared.
We made 2 meetings in the village of the people over there to explain what we thought could be linked to all the cases. And we went back last year to have the follow-up of the village. And there's no more ALS cases. We have no more cases and no more acute poisoning.
Now, I won't pretend the case in Montchavin is fully closed. With the case control data they used to solve this outbreak, all we can really prove is an association with false morels and ALS. And yes, there could be another explanation that we missed, although I find it all pretty convincing. But that's not really the point. The point is how they got there. Because if you step back, the parallels to Bozeman are hard to ignore. A severe illness, negative testing, and no clear cause. So what do? Well, you start with 3 things. And the first is to make absolutely sure you know what mushroom you're dealing with, which they've already done in Bozeman with DNA confirmation. So the second thing you need to do is rule out absolutely every other cause before you land on this novel culprit. Remember, in Montchavin, they didn't land on the false morels just from interviews. They had first done extensive testing to remove the more common culprits.
For our collaboration, Dr. Lagrange and colleagues had ruled out known genetic abnormalities, an artificial snow, and finally, to her great credit, Malene looked at BMAA. She found no association with the cases. So all of that work was either in progress or completed before we looked at the question of mushroom use.
So as Dr. Spencer said, only after that did the mushroom rise to the top. And back in Bozeman, they also left no stone unturned.
Staphylococcal enterotoxin, Bacillus cereus diarrheal enterotoxin, Bacillus cereus emetic toxin, alpha-amanitin, gyromitrin, hydrazine and methylhydrazine, and more than 900 compounds, just the pesticide residues. All of those test results were negative.
Heather, Rachel, Dr. Ye, and the team ruled out over 900 chemicals, common bacteria, and even deadly mushroom mix-ups. If there's a common cause we've missed, I don't know what it is. So the last thing that we can do, the same thing they did in Montchavin, interview each of those patients and find out exactly what is different about those who got sick and those who didn't.
We really needed epidemiologic data.
Again, Heather Demarest from the Gallatin County Health Department.
And once we looped in our CDC partners early on, they had suggested we conduct this case control study.
Of course, we had to look at this systematically. That's why we coordinated very closely with Montana and the FDA throughout this investigation. From the CDC standpoint, our main challenges pertained to the study design and the questionnaire. We had a whole team who worked to figure out which questions to ask people. All of the interviews were conducted by local investigators with the Gallatin County Health Department. So Heather and her colleagues can probably provide more details about their experiences and any logistical challenges they encountered.
Fortunately, people were really interested in participating. And a big part of that was there was a lot of local interest. You know, we're a small town, so especially with these severe outcomes happening, there was a lot of local interest early on, a lot of people talking about it on social media. And we also had some press releases, which then solicited even more individuals reaching out and wanting to help. So we had our patient interviews occurring really early on. And through those patient interviews, we asked extensive food history, found that the majority of cases, not all, had consumed a special roll with morel mushrooms on various dates at the establishment.
And they published this as a study in the CDC Morbidity and Mortality Weekly. So we finally have our epidemiologic data that we can objectively assess, just like in Montchavin. And when I'm reading through this CDC report, some things are sticking out to me.
Found that the majority of cases, not all, had consumed a special roll with morel mushrooms. Not all cases consumed a special roll with morel mushrooms. Not all cases consumed morel mushrooms.
Did you catch that? When they finally went back and confirmed everything that people ate in the outbreak, objectively, not everyone who got sick even ate the morels. Not everyone who ate the morels got sick. So we've got a problem. Because if this was really the mushrooms, it should be cleaner than that. Like in Montchavin, where everyone who was impacted ate false morels. But instead, we're left with something messy. It doesn't quite fit. And when the story stops making sense, you have to ask if you have the right suspect. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Next episode, we're going to put this CDC data on trial to see where it holds up and where it breaks down, and whether that means this mushroom gets exonerated. To do that, I'll be bringing in a friend.
Do you want to introduce that case that we had?
A toxicologist who's already gone head-to-head with a case like this and didn't think the morel was to blame. And if this case doesn't hold up and the mushroom walks free, then we're left with a much bigger question. What did we miss? That's next time on A Morel Dilemma. If you are finding anything in this series valuable, the best way to support the show is simple. Leave a rating, write a review, and share it with someone who should hear it. This project is completely independent. No funding, no sponsors, no institutions. Just an effort to help people understand how poisoning outbreaks are identified, investigated, and hopefully prevented. If you'd like to support the show more directly, there are 3 things you can do. Head to thepoisonlab.com/support to get access to all episodes early and ad-free, or check out our educational projects like Poisonous Fungus Among Us and the Gotta Pick 'em card game. Links are in the show notes. Either way, thanks for being here and for helping share this story. Because this won't be the last outbreak, but maybe together we can recognize the next one sooner. This show is written and produced by me, Ryan Feldman. Music is from Pixabay, featuring artists Vera Miller, Driver Silver, Lexan Music, and Rocco Garibaldi. Audio production and sound design by Max McClellan, MKM Audio. This show is a production of Clinical Toxicology, LLC.
6 people are now dead.
Investigators are focused on a spice that should never have been in food.
And state health officials are now working with federal agencies to find the
Hey everybody, Ryan with a quick interruption. This series only exists because of listeners like you. There are no sponsors, institutions, or billionaires quietly bankrolling this in the background. Just a lot of time, research, and production to bring these stories to life. And there are real costs that come with that. Editing software, sound design, website hosting, podcast hosting, advertising to get the word out, and a lot more. So if you're finding value in it, there are a few ways you can support the show. The first is to go to thepoisonlab.com/support and become a supporting member for as little as $1 a month. And for that, you are going to get access to every single episode ad-free and access to amazing bonus content. You get access to all of that by becoming a supporting member. But if you want to support the show and get something a little more tangible in return, there are 2 educational projects I've built alongside this series you should check out. The first is Poisonous Fungus Among Us. This is a short, simple, rhyming book about mushroom foraging safety. It's built for kids, families, curious foragers. It's a 7-minute read. It uses real, beautiful photographs of poisonous mushrooms and delivers scientifically accurate information in a way that rhymes. You can find it on Amazon by searching Poisonous Fungus Among Us, and it's also free on Kindle Unlimited. The second project is called Gotta Pick 'em. It is a poisonous mushroom card game designed by toxicologists who treat mushroom poisoning. It's a simple, fast-paced card game, but underneath it, you're learning how different mushroom poisons work, what organs they impact, the basics about their anatomy, antidotes we use for them, and you actually don't need to know anything about mushrooms to play. You can find out way more about it at gottapick'em.com, which is the companion blog that will teach you not only how to play, but a lot more about poisonous mushrooms. So, if you want to support independent public health storytelling like this, you can find links to all of those options in the show notes. But you don't have to pay anything to support the show. Just being here or sharing this with someone who might learn from it goes a long way. So thank you for listening. Let's get back to the show.